Hello YouTube and welcome back to Old Maryland 63 C10. This is episode 10, and in today's episode we're going to work on breaking down the front suspension on our truck to get the frame ready for powder coating. So stick around. Okay, so a couple things before we get started with actually tearing everything down. I went ahead and pulled the tires off. I wanted to see what the brake shoes and the brake drums looked like. I had a suspicion that the previous owner had probably gone through it, and I was right. So the brake drums look brand new, the brakes themselves look brand new, the wheel cylinders look like they might have been rebuilt, cleaned up. And I'm gonna be selling all of that because like I said, I'm going back with disc up front on this truck. So I'm just gonna sell the whole thing in one complete set, drums, shoes, the spindles, the whole thing. And then I went ahead and put the motor back in the chassis. I was thinking that would be enough weight, hopefully, to compress the springs, but it's not quite going to be enough. So what I ended up doing was, again, I borrowed this from Gibson 63. No need to promote his channel because I think everybody that works on 63s knows his channel. But I just basically took some old scrap pieces of lumber I had, laid a piece across the frame, and then nailed the top to the rafters in my barn to be able to hold the frame down while we jack up the springs. And so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna work one side at a time with basically all the pieces. So in other words, I'm gonna knock the springs and get everything taken, all the steering taken apart on this side, move to the other side, do the same thing, come back to this side, and I think I'm gonna try to knock the control arm bushings out while it's still attached to the frame. I do have a vise, but I don't know if I have a big enough vise. So I figured I'm gonna use the frame basically as a way to hold these bushings. So I'm gonna knock the top ones out and then hopefully be able to break these bottom ones loose while they're still on the frame. I'm also going to do one side at a time so that I could keep these shims straight. I'm gonna bag everything and mark everything so when it goes back together, I'm putting the shims in the same spot. And the same thing with the tie rod ends. So I'm gonna try to get these tie rod ends off on this side, get everything apart, mark everything, and then move the other side just to try to stay organized as I can. Because again, hopefully it's not terribly long before it goes back together, but again, just want to have everything marked. I'm gonna get new bushings, or bump stops I should say, so they'll come out. This ball joint clearly has been replaced because it has bolts, but I have all new ball joints. The other side still is riveted, so that's probably the original one. And then just another thing to note, I'm pretty sure this is the original idle arm. And you can see this one, sorry about that, this one kind of breaks away from the frame here, has a little jog. The one I bought from Moog is just straight, but there is a spacer. So I think that spacer is probably supposed to go in there. If anybody's redone a 63 and had a replacement Moog idler arm and used the spacer to fill in that spot, let me know. Or if people use that as basically a big washer on the inside for strength, but I think I'm gonna have to make sure I use that spacer in that spot. But again, if anybody else has done it, please comment below on how they did it. So let's go ahead and get started on breaking this side down and getting the pieces apart. Okay, so we took some time. I knocked the shock off, I broke the brake line loose. I used obviously brake line wrench to be able to do that because it was pretty stiff. But I was able to get that out without destroying it, because when I do take the brake lines out, I want to hold on to them. And I'm buying new brake lines, and if the bends aren't exactly right, I'll at least have the original to look at. So I was trying to be careful as I could with the brake lines. So I spent another couple minutes knocking out cotter pins from the ball joints and from the tie rod end. So right now we're going to take the tie rod end, or the tie rods off. And then we'll jack it up and see if we can get this spring out. So we'll go do that first, and then we'll take our pickle fork and hopefully break it loose and hopefully not have too much trouble. And then we have one tie rod end. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and break these bolts loose. I'm gonna leave them on the ball joints. So I'll get these loose almost to the end. I'll probably have to reposition the camera, and we'll see if we can get a jack under here to start lifting and compressing the spring, and then break the ball joints loose, and then gently lower the spring. Okay, so the upper and lower ball joints are free, so I'll probably reposition the camera, get the jack underneath it here. I will say that so far, actually I shouldn't say it, but I'll say it, the nuts have been coming off pretty smooth. I will say I've been soaking this thing in penetrating oil. Every time I would come up and do something, I would squirt these joints off to hopefully make it a little bit easier. I don't know if that had that big of an impact or not, but they're coming apart easy. And again, I should have never said that because I haven't done the other side yet. But let me reposition and get the jack underneath here. Okay, so the jack's underneath here. I've got the control arm up off the bushing a little bit, so the spring is compressed. So shouldn't have, hopefully, anything pop off and hit me. So we're going to go ahead and try to knock this top one out first, and hopefully it'll break loose like the others. Okay, let's whack the bottom one. There she goes. Almost had it on my foot. Okay, that's one side. I think this ball joint was bad, so let's lower it down and see if the spring comes out. There she goes. Okay, we'll do the other side just like that. And then once that side is done, we'll come back and we'll start doing the control arms, trying to get the bushings out, and again, marking everything on this side. So let's get the other side done. Okay, so I got the driver's side taken apart. The bottom U-joint was just as hard as this side. So I had to use some heat, had to get a little cavemanish with the pickle fork to get it to come apart, but it's apart. So now we're back over here on the passenger side to basically start breaking down the A-arms. And as I said in the beginning, I think I'm going to leave everything on the truck and try to take as many things off the A-arms as I can while it's still attached. So I'm going to knock the ball joint out, take the bumper stop out, and back these off and see if they'll come apart. And basically I'm just trying to use the truck as a vise in this case, because I have a vise, but I don't know how big it is or how strong it would be to get these off. I will say I already broke these loose. They were a little tough. I'm kind of worried about the bottom ones because they're even bigger. So we'll see when we get there. But let's go ahead and take the ball joint out, the bump stop out, back these all the way out, see if the arm comes off, and then we'll take this top piece off, keep the shims and everything together, and then move on to the bottom. And these are a 1 3/8 socket, and I think the bottom are 1 5/16, but we'll look in a second. But these are 1 3/8. Had to go out and buy a socket for it. Took me a while to find one because they are big. still need my breaker bar on it. And we want to pull these off and save these just in the same spot that they're in. Okay, so I'm glad I left these on the truck because this needs my breaker bar and some EMT to be able to break loose. And I thought for sure I was going to break my breaker bar. And considering I got 2 more to go, I don't doubt I will break it eventually. So, but this seems to get them at least loose enough to get going. They did not want to budge. Well, I have to say I'm glad I did it that way, because I don't think my vise would have handled knocking those bushings off the end. So I'm gonna have to figure out some way to do it maybe differently on the way in. I did see online where somebody basically does it the opposite way. They bolt the bushing up to the frame and then put the A-arms on and tighten them down from there. That might have to be my route, or I might have to find somebody with a little bit bigger vise than what I have. So, okay, so at least it's out. We're gonna take the control arm bushing off the bottom here and move on to the other side. Okay, and that finishes up this side. So we'll do the same process on the other side to get the A-arms out, and then we'll move on to getting the last of the linkage out and start taking a few other things off. So we'll get the other side done next. So the last thing we need to do for the suspension is to get the drag link out. So we're going to start on this side with the idler arm. I already popped the cotter pin out. So we'll go ahead and knock this loose and then move over to the steering box and take that side apart. I did take down my bracing that I had to hold the frame down because obviously we don't need that anymore. Give us some more space to work up front here. So we'll go ahead and knock this side off and switch to the other side. Okay, so I'd already broken the bolt loose for the pitman arm, and luckily it's the same size bolt as the upper bushing. So that worked out well because I had the ratchet. So I went ahead and rented a puller, and we're going to go ahead and see if this will take it off. And there she goes. I think. Yep. One pitman arm. Okay, steering box is all that's left. And there's the steering box. Okay, in that last little short video, I wrapped up the last couple pieces to pull off the front of the frame here. I was trying to save the brake line without having to cut it, but it just wasn't happening, so we took the easy route and snipped it off. Bends are still there, so if I got to compare it to the new lines, I'll have that. So let's see what we have left, or what we have as far as parts. So this is basically all the stuff that is old and not going anywhere. So I'm gonna get rid of the brake drums, a pile of bushings, shocks, castle nuts, and of course the springs. And again, I saved the brake line there. It's in pretty good shape as far as the bends. I didn't mangle it up too bad, but I did have to cut it off. So this is basically all the parts that we're gonna end up reusing for the most part, okay? So obviously steering box, drag link. Got everything on this side of the table is from the driver's side. I marked the bushings, so D for driver front, and then DR for driver rear. All this will get put in one box. I saved bolts and I marked bags with bolts. I don't know if I'm gonna replace all the hardware, but I figured I'd at least organize it and keep it. And of course the A-arms are gonna go to the powder coater. The tie rod, inner and outer tie rod ends, they're just gonna go in a box again because we're gonna measure those up to hopefully make the new ones be the same. One other change I am gonna make, these are the original U-bolts that hold the lower control arm on. I'm gonna put these much beefier ones. I've read online guys having problems or having these original ones crack, and I definitely don't want that. So I've read that people are making this modification, putting, I think this is a later model from maybe 73 up. It is Dorman part number 13503, and these are 9/16 U-bolts. So I'll have to make a modification to the cross member there. I got to drill the hole out a little bigger to be able to get them in, but I'm going to make that update, make it a little bit more sturdy. Okay, so these are all the parts we're going to work with moving forward. Had the junk pile over there, and we'll come right back and wrap this video up. That's going to pretty much finish up tearing down the front suspension and getting a lot of the components off the front part of the frame to be able to send it to powder coat. Once we get to the end of these videos, I do like to add a little things that I've learned or maybe advice. The one thing I would say is if you don't have a really big vise or a very sturdy bench, really obviously both, leaving the control arms attached to try to break those bushings loose was probably helpful. I know my vise and bench would have never held up clamping those things and trying to break those loose. They were pretty much bare. They were probably the hardest part. The lower ball joints gave me the fit, but they were really worn out. The one of them, when I went to press it out, the whole ball joint fell apart. So the one takeaway again is if you don't have some pretty solid bench and big vise, I would leave everything attached to the frame to at least break things loose to start tearing down those bushings. So again, thanks for watching. If this is helping you at all with your project, please like and subscribe. And in the next video, we're going to start on the back half of the frame and we'll start taking apart the rear end. So we'll see you next time.